The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've talked about the problem of low voter turnout in the United States many, many times. And usually when we have that conversation, the discussion, the sort of main argument becomes whether the United States should implement mandatory voting like some countries have or not. And the reality is there are lots of options in between. And Oregon has actually taken action on this. The LA Times is reporting that as of this week, Oregonians will have to register not to vote. In other words, under the new Oregon law, any eligible voter will be registered automatically unless they choose to opt out of being registered to vote. Instead of opting in, voters must opt out if they do not want to be on the voter rolls. Those who are registered through this new process are going to be notified by mail. They'll be given 3 weeks to take themselves off of the voting rolls. And if they don't opt out, the Secretary of State's office will mail them a ballot automatically 20 days before any election. This makes so much sense for so many reasons, and we're going to get into some of that. The governor, Kate Brown, said as she signed the bill, quote, "In my role as Secretary of State, I proposed a new way of registering to vote. We call it New Motor Voter. It was my top priority, and I am absolutely thrilled to be signing this into law as the new governor. Virtually every Oregonian will be able to have their voice heard." There are about 2.2 million registered voters in Oregon, according to Tony Green, who's a spokesman for the Secretary of State, Gene Atkins. And an additional 800,000 or so are not registered, but are eligible to vote in Oregon. So the new law is expected to bring about half of those, 400,000 more voters, onto the voter rolls. Myrna Perez, who's the director of the Voters' Rights and Elections Project at the Brennan Center for Justice, says that this is a, quote, groundbreaking innovation. Quote, "Oregon takes it further than any other state by putting the burden on the government. Instead of asking voters, do you want to register to vote? They ask voters, do you not want to vote?" So let's really dig into this. I never understood why you had to actively register to vote unless you've moved, for example, and you have to let someone know, oh, I used to vote here, now I vote somewhere else. That makes sense. But otherwise, why is the default that you don't get to vote? You're not on the list of voters unless you take this step of saying, I'm not showing up to vote today. I'm just showing up to register to vote in the future, with the exception of states that have same-day registration, of course. So the consequences will be obviously higher voter turnout. If you get mailed a ballot automatically, you are way more likely to vote. So if we take sort of concentric circles, where at the center you have likely voters who have voted in the last 4 elections, for example. They are very likely to go to the voting booth on election day. Then you have those who have voted in the past and are registered, but don't vote quite as frequently, and they're sort of a little less likely to vote. And as you go down this sort of tiered or concentric circle system, you get to people who do have some interest in voting, but they may have forgotten to register, or they don't really care about registering, or they would vote if they were mailed a ballot, but they wouldn't actually go anywhere at 7 a.m. before work on voting day. These are the people who are going to be voting that as a result of this program. And remember that as progressives, we want more people voting. We want more people voting not only because we want a democracy that is truly representative of as many of the people in it as possible, but number 2, because the more liberal candidate tends to win more often when voter turnout is higher. So Republicans don't want to increase voter turnout unless it's a very specific group of people. Progressives and liberals always should want to increase voter turnout because, all else being equal, progressives do better when more people vote. We have now the final roster for the first real Republican primary debate, which is going to be tomorrow, Thursday evening. It's the Fox News Facebook debate. They did a pseudo debate in New Hampshire a couple of days ago. We talked to Luke Vargas about it yesterday. It wasn't really a debate in the traditional sense. This Fox News Facebook debate hopefully will be a little more of a debate. Fox News yesterday announced the 10 candidates who are going to be participating. Not everybody made the cut. Obviously, more than 10 Republican candidates at this point. Donald Trump is in. Jeb Bush is in. Scott Walker, Mike Huckabee, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Chris Christie, and John Kasich will be the 10 debaters in the sort of top tier debate. And then they're going to do a secondary debate earlier in the evening, which will be Rick Perry, Rick Santorum, Bobby Jindal, Carly Fiorina, Lindsey Graham, George Pataki, and Jim Gilmore. So there's a little bit of controversy over how Fox News ultimately selected which candidates were in and which were out. They said they were going to take an average of the most recent 5 polls from what they called major nationally recognized organizations that use standard methodological techniques. And based on the average of those 5 polls, they would figure out who are the top 10 candidates. And the controversy is that they appear to have used the most recent 4 polls, skipped the 5th most recent, and used the 6th most recent. The problem that I have with calling it a really big controversy is 2 of the 3 analyses I read said that the 10 participants would not have been any different had there been had they actually used the 5th instead of 6th most recent poll. But stepping back from it a little bit, quite frankly, I don't care. It's one set of lunatics or another. Who's really surprised, after all, that Fox News may have manipulated a little bit which polls they decided to use in the end? What I'm concerned with is what is going to happen in this debate. Number one, how religious will the debate be? We have seen in both Republican and Democratic debates over the last several election cycles this question of what is your favorite Bible verse, for example, a question that I just think is almost a satirical question, but actually a real question that we sometimes get in debates. And the Republican Party, traditionally considered the more religious party, I'm curious how big of a factor religion will be during the debate. Does Donald Trump bully people? That will be something else I'm interested in seeing. The idea, I think, is that the candidates not really address each other too much directly, but they do have this rule where if you are addressed specifically by another candidate, you will have the opportunity to respond. That could get interesting. Who lies the most? And I think I'm expecting a lot of lying here. Let's be direct about it. There's going to be a lot of lying in this debate. But who does the most lying and who does the least skilled lying? Some liars are better by a combination of using weasel words and sort of dancing around the questions at lying in a way that is less obvious. Rick Perry, for example, in the pseudo pre-debate in New Hampshire a couple of days ago, was just very obviously saying disconnected nonsense from any of the questions that he was being asked. And then I'm also interested in who makes no impact, because with such a field, we have 16 or so candidates, 10 in this debate, and then some more in the second tier debate. You can't really do nothing if you're not a front runner. So right now, according to the polls, somebody like Jeb Bush or Scott Walker or Donald Trump, if you believe that he actually has a shot, they don't need to be as proactive in this debate as someone who's polling, say, 3 or 4%. If you're polling 3 or 4% and you basically just go up there, answer your questions, do what you can, and you don't really make headlines, I don't see how you get from 3 or 4% to 8, 10, or 12%, which you're going to need to do if you're going to ultimately secure this nomination. So I'm going to be paying attention to those things, and I'll be very curious to see who fades into the background. The New Hampshire pre-debate was pretty milquetoast, like I told you. Very, very little impact made on me by any of the candidates. And I think here, bigger stage, more people will be paying attention. Will anybody make an impact? What will the headlines be on Friday? We will absolutely be covering the debate. Let's go to Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush was at the Southern Baptist Convention in Tennessee yesterday. He is the former Florida governor, who is also, of course, running for president on the Republican side. He was asked about Planned Parenthood, which is a healthcare provider. Republicans have been trying to cut funding to Planned Parenthood for a while now, and Jeb Bush responded in a way that immediately drew all sorts of criticism from people across the political spectrum, saying the next president should veto Planned Parenthood. Okay, that part was okay with the crowd. People mostly clapped for that. And then he said, women's issues do not need so much money, not the $500 million, $500 million that they receive. Quote, I'm not sure we need $500 million for women's health issues. People flipped out. Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton tweeted to him, you are absolutely, unequivocally wrong. No surprise to many. Shortly thereafter, he put out a statement saying that actually he misspoke. With regards to women's health funding broadly, I misspoke, as there are countless community health centers, rural clinics, and other women's health organizations that need to be fully funded. Now, what's funny about this explanation is he had already said Planned Parenthood needed to be defunded. So if he had already said that, why would he then repeat, I don't know that we need $500 million for women's health issues, if he was only really talking about Planned Parenthood, as he's sort of implying here? I mean, it belies credulity. It's completely an unbelievable apology or explanation. He just had no idea what he was saying, right? He just misspoke about it. If this is sort of the type of Republican outreach that we're going to see with regard to women and minorities during the 2016 election, we certainly have a very interesting ride ahead of us. And when I was thinking about the $500 million number, I wasn't so much thinking about $500 million for women's health issues. I was thinking the $4 trillion that we spent in Iraq and Afghanistan as a result of Jeb Bush's brother. Think about the amount of money that is, right? We're talking about $500 million here, and the right is just going absolutely crazy over that amount of money. $4 trillion spent on two wars, in great part as a result of the bungled decisions made by Jeb Bush's brother, and we still are not seeing any widespread condemnation of that from the Republican Party. What will you be paying attention to in the next couple of weeks, including in the upcoming Republican debate here? Send me your thoughts on Twitter. I'm at twitter.com/dpacman. Producer Lewis is at twitter.com/LewisMotomedy.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is funded by our audience through the David Pakman Show membership program. We have this thing called membership, where you get a whole extra show called the bonus show. You get commercial-free audio and video feeds of the show. You get invited to members-only town hall meetings with Lewis and with me, and lots of other great benefits. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Someone who recently signed up is Judith Brown, today's member of the day. Judith, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. And I'll remind everybody, this Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we are sending out an email to our mailing list with a fantastic, huge membership discount. We did this once in February and people loved it. We're trying it again this Friday. If you're interested in this big membership discount, there's going to be a few-hour window starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Friday, during which you'll be able to sign up. Just go to our website, davidpakman.com, and sign up for our mailing list, our newsletter. You'll see the sign-up link, the sign-up box, I guess you would call it, on the left side of the website. Sign up, and then Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, you will be notified of this great membership special. It's a good discount, not going to lie. Let's get into Hatriot Mail for this week.
It's like taking an apple pie, filling it with pages from the Old Testament, topping it with hollow points, and serving it with a side of homophobia. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
So we're getting more and more into election time, and this week's Hatriot Mail is about the election. It's about the 2016 Republican candidates. It is about immigration, and so many other things. Let's take a listen together.
I support Donald Trump because he said the truth about Mexicans and doesn't bend over to the will of the politically correct. He's way better than Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush. Trump 2016. Also, David Pakman, you need to get those PC Mexicans' balls out of your mouth. Any candidate who's anti-illegal immigration gets my vote.
Yeah, I don't know of a single candidate on either the Democratic or Republican side that is in favor of illegal immigration, like the Hatriot is suggesting here. I can't think of a single one. And the Donald Trump stuff is really starting to scare me. I've talked about this guy who in Northampton, Massachusetts, where our program originated at the very beginning of the show, how there's this guy who I can't tell if he's a panhandler or if he's just a guy who is kind of out on the street or what the deal is with him. For years now, when I walk by, I'll hear an utterance that sounds political, right? Once he said, why don't you have someone like Michael Savage on your show? Give a little more balance. Or no, talk to someone like Michael Savage. Give a little more balance. And he didn't say your show. I misspoke there. And I started to wonder, does this guy recognize me as the host of the David Pakman Show? Or is he just saying political stuff to whoever walks by? And a few days ago, I walked by and he uttered, I was already past him, and he uttered, Donald Trump for president. Donald Trump. And I turned back and he wasn't looking at me. He was just looking straight ahead. And I'm increasingly thinking that this guy is heckling me specifically. But in any case, that's the sort of character that I'm personally seeing who supports Donald Trump. And then a few people here and there on our YouTube channel. I remain convinced that Trump is not going to ultimately secure the Republican nomination, but certainly one Hatriot at least would like to see that happen. I want to talk a little bit about something Donald Trump has been saying, and even though I think Donald Trump's candidacy is essentially a joke, he is using one talking point that is parroted by some others, and Daniel Dresner has essentially destroyed on the Washington Post. Daniel Dresner wrote about Donald Trump's campaign promise that he will bring back jobs to the United States from China and Mexico. Let's put aside just for a second that Donald Trump is one of the people responsible for sending jobs to Mexico. Like, for example, the manufacturing of his menswear line, his suits, those were being manufactured in Mexico. So Trump is in part responsible for the problem. I don't know how likely it is he's going to be the person who solves the problem. But Daniel Dresner points out that this idea of bringing jobs back to the U.S., when we're talking about manufacturing jobs, which is really the discussion, it just doesn't make any sense. And what Dresner points out, and David Farenthold also points out, as Dresner writes about, is that there is really no chance of these jobs coming back. It's not that the manufacturing jobs have moved away and it's just because of a bad trade deal that they haven't yet come back. And as soon as someone like Trump gets in and gets tough with Mexico and China or whatever it is he's going to do, that these manufacturing jobs are going to come back. These jobs are gone. It is just not going to happen. And as Dresner writes in the Washington Post, quote, the truth is that while a small fraction of American manufacturing jobs migrated overseas over the past few decades, a far greater fraction of manufacturing jobs simply disappeared and are not coming back. The far bigger driver of these job losses is the creative destruction that comes from technological innovation and productivity increases. As Matthew Iglesias wrote in Slate a few years ago, on net, global manufacturing employment declined from 96 to 2006. Factory jobs certainly added in China, but they weren't one-to-one displacing factory jobs in the West. Long story short, technology combined with our changing sort of place within society as humans in the world of manufacturing work have created a situation where these jobs are just disappearing. They're not just disappearing from the United States, right? They're disappearing overall. And Trump's refrain that he's going to bring the jobs back is based on the false idea that the jobs in manufacturing from the 70s and the 80s, even into the late 80s and early 90s, they're just somewhere else. And if the trade situation was right, if the taxation situation were right, if the incentives were right, they would move right back to the US. This is just not happening. And with regard to Donald Trump, it's also hilarious that the guy who keeps talking about bringing the jobs back is, number one, an exporter of jobs himself, manufacturing his menswear line in Mexico, and is known for a reality show in which he tells people that they're fired. Sandy Hook and the Sandy Hook shooting in Newtown, Connecticut has been fodder for conspiracy theorists for a long time. And these conspiracy theories tend to focus on along the lines of, oh, false flags, or it was a government crafted plan to create a pretext for grabbing guns or whatever. But there's a whole other line of reasoning, if we can even really call it reasoning, with regard to Sandy Hook, and it's a more religious line. And I'm going to play an example for you. This is Bryan Fischer from the American Family radio program, where he said that the entire Sandy Hook shooting, aside from whether it was a pretext or not, or Obama, whatever, that God allowed the shooting to happen because of legal abortion in the United States. Here is Bryan Fischer addressing a pretty logical question if you believe God exists, which is, why did God not intervene? Why did the all-powerful, all-knowing God not intervene and stop or prevent the Sandy Hook shooting? Bryan Fischer says the following.
You know, one of the questions comes up about an incident like the shooting in Sandy Hook, the cold-blooded killing of those children in their first grade classroom. How does that happen? Why does God permit that? Why doesn't God intervene? Well, Isaiah has an answer. It's not that he can't. It's because our sins as a nation have driven God from us. Here's what he says. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, or his ear dull that it cannot hear, but. So why is it that God doesn't save? Why is it that he doesn't hear? Your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you so that he does not hear. Your hands are defiled with blood. So it says, when we lift our hands in prayer as a nation, what he sees is the blood on our hands of the 57 million unborn babies whose lives have been taken through abortion. So he can't hear our prayers because the blood of the unborn cries out to him, and he can't hear our prayers over the pleas of the blood of the unborn.
Okay, so I think I follow the logic. God wants to punish us for killing children by killing children, if you believe Bryan Fischer. Bryan Fischer thinks that abortion is the murder of innocent children, so that the all-powerful, merciful God is murdering innocent children to punish us for murdering innocent children. This is called moral scapegoating. And rather than make abortion-proof fetuses, the moral scapegoating suggests that God allows school gun massacres as a sort of punishment or message about legal abortion. And I love this, the completely arbitrary choice of abortion as the cause of a particular event in Connecticut. I know that some people take offense to what I'm about to say. And if I'm wrong, explain to me how I'm wrong and I'll correct what I'm about to say. I truly don't see the difference between this type of reasoning. Abortion is the killing of children, so God kills more children as some kind of punishment. I don't see a difference between that type of reasoning and paranoid delusions that would be treated with medication. I don't see the difference. And this is not to say that people with paranoid delusions are bad people or that healthcare and mental health should be stigmatized in any way. I'm just saying this to me seems like a condition that we would want to treat and help people with as best we can. I thought Sandy Hook was because a mentally ill man got access to firearms and had the desire to go out there and start shooting. I didn't think that it had anything to do with a conscious choice by the deity to send a message because we have a procedure called abortion in the United States. If I'm wrong with the analogy I'm making here, religious beliefs to the type of paranoid delusions that we would consider worthy of treatment, please email me and explain to me exactly how. Don't just say, oh, David, you hate Christians. This is not about Christians. The hardcore Orthodox Jews have the same issues. The extremist right-wing Muslims have the same issues. This exists in many religions. It's not unique to Christianity. Email me and tell me specifically why the analogy is wrong.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's a pleasure to welcome back to the show Bob Werb, co-founder of the Space Frontier Foundation. Bob, you know, we've been hearing so much in the last couple of years between the Mars rover and the discovery of certain exoplanets, like most recently Kepler 452b, about space travel and space exploration. But a conversation that's not had as frequently is, what is our capacity to really explore any significant part of our solar system, never mind our, the universe? So let's start there. Over the last 5 years, have there been any appreciable advancements in our ability to travel throughout space?
Yes, there's been dramatic progress, not so much on the technical side as on the programmatic side, as we've shifted from a purely government centrally controlled system to one that makes more use of the power of free enterprise, which of course is America's strength.
So what specifically has changed in terms of, you know, is there any good analogy that you could give with regard to the vastness of space and our ability to explore even a fraction of that?
Well, with the kinds of technology that are in development today, we pretty clearly have the ability to travel with people and machines throughout the solar system. And to make use of the resource of the solar system to make life better here on Earth. And that's going to be the focus of almost all space activity over the next, decades. Going beyond the solar system is another whole thing, and we can talk about that if you'd like.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because, when people hear, oh, Kepler 452b, for example, is one of the closest of these types of Earth-like planets that have been found, and it's 1,400 light years away. Talk about how far we are from being even a tiny fraction of the way to being able to traverse that distance.
Really, really far. 1,400 light years is a fantastic difference, and it's way beyond our ability to do over the foreseeable future. For now, we really are limited to the speed of light, and I have no opinion at all about the possibility of warp drives or traveling through wormholes. Humanity simply doesn't know enough about the physics involved to even say if it's in the realm of the possible. But who knows? Maybe 50 years from now, somebody will find a way around the speed of light. On the other hand, maybe it won't happen for 50 centuries. Well, who knows? Maybe 50 minutes from now, somebody will figure it out. But for now, for today, I think for the next 50 minutes, it's perfectly safe to leave faster-than-light travel in the realm of fiction. If, in fact, we're limited to the speed of light, trips to other star systems will take a very, very long time. Even worse, for those in a hurry to get started, is that it makes no sense to start out on a really long trip if you think that somebody leaving decades after you with better technology would get there first.
All right, well, let's explore that, because I know that that sort of thought experiment quite well. So this is the idea that at any point where you might start out on a journey, if you believe that 5, 10, 15 years from now, there is going to be a new method of travel that is so much faster than the one we have now, that the future travelers or the future craft will arrive wherever it is that we're trying to get before what we would be able to launch now, that it, logically speaking, doesn't make sense to launch anything now. But isn't that sort of a dangerous path to go down, because you may end up never launching anything because you think, hey, in the future somebody will pass us anyway?
Well, there is that possibility. I think eventually you get to a point where either the pace of change in technology or space technology slows down a little bit, and you have some kind of sense that it makes sense to start out on these kind of really long trips. Or alternatively, you get up to a significant fraction of the speed of light. And then, you know, time dilation and all that stuff comes into play. And then again, it makes sense to start thinking about sending people to other star systems. But this is, you know, really far in the future, because now we can't get anywhere close to the speed of light.
Let's talk about something a little bit closer to us in terms of distance into the future, which is manned travel to Mars. I'm sure that you've been following the Mars One project and other ideas that are out there about getting to Mars, even starting to launch towards Mars in the next 6 to 8 years. What's your sense about how realistic some of the current plans are?
Well, obviously, some of the plans are exaggerated for marketing purposes, but I think, and to address Mars One, I have no idea whether they'll raise the money they need, but they are on the right path in one sense, is that it's a one-way trip. I've never been able to figure out why people think we should use government money to send people to Mars and then bring them back. I can certainly think what the public purpose might be for sending people to Mars, but if so, what's the public purpose for bringing them home? If you're sending people there, they really ought to stay and colonize the planet and do what it is you sent them to do it for. I think it's inevitable that we'll have people on the surface of Mars, but the question is, why are you sending them and who's paying for it?
And what do you think the right reasons to go to Mars? What do you think the right reasons are?
Well, long ago I was a biology major, and to me the most exciting thing is that we might be able to find microbial life on Mars. And while we can certainly collect samples robotically, it's very hard to build a good laboratory that's completely robotic or teleoperated. So, you know, one could imagine wanting to build a good lab on the surface of Mars to bring the samples to, so you can really look at and see if there's any extant or perhaps extinct microbial life on Mars. I think it's one of the most exciting things that we could do, and I would love to see it happen.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I got an interesting question from a viewer wanting to hear from you kind of about microbial life. And the question was phrased or posed in this way. Humans and life in general on Earth have adapted to the microbes and bacteria that exist here over a very, very long time. If we were to find microbial life on Mars or elsewhere, wouldn't that pose a pretty significant challenge to humans living there, because we would just basically be dropped in completely unadapted to that local microbial life?
We would be unadapted to them, but they would also be unadapted to us.
Okay.
It becomes kind of improbable, I mean, fantastically improbable, that they would cause any diseases in us.
Is it so that's not a likely scenario?
Not a likely scenario. Now, reverse contamination is a concern. You have to worry that there are microbes on Mars that would thrive here on Earth. Now, at least some material from Mars gets to Earth, because asteroids from Mars land up on Earth. But of course, they've been in space a long time, and you know, as far as we know, nothing has ever survived the transit from Mars to Earth. But if we start bringing back microbial life, I mean, who knows? It might thrive in the Arctic, where very little Earth life thrives. It might, you know, we just don't know. So we do need to be very careful about what we bring back from Mars.
The other thing I want to touch on in terms of thinking about space travel is the topic of radiation. So we know that when you fly in a commercial airplane, you're exposed to more radiation than you are when you're standing, you know, at sea level on Earth. But the difference in the radiation would not really be enough unless you're essentially, from the studies I've read, on a plane almost 24 hours a day to cause a significant impact on health. Not so when it comes to travel through space, where radiation is orders of magnitude higher than when you're on an airplane. So talk about that challenge with regard to long trips into space.
Yeah, first of all, I want to be clear that this does not affect orbits like the International Space Station,
right,
where they do not get a whole lot more radiation than pilots get on very high airplanes. But once you get out beyond the magnetosphere, you have to deal with a very serious radiation problem. And there really are only two prospects for dealing with that. One is to use a lot of shielding, and that would be, you know, anything from lead to water. The alternative is to find a way to get the human body to live with that kind of high levels of radiation. There are people working on that. I don't know how much progress they're making. You know, but shielding is certainly possible.
So that is, it sounds like, an issue that has to be dealt with if we're going to be doing any of these longer trips.
Or if we want to live in space. The same would be true on the surface of Mars or on the surface of the Moon. You know, you don't actually get to go live on the surface of Mars. You get to go live underneath the surface of Mars.
All right, let me remind everybody that we have been speaking with Bob Werb, co-founder of the Space Frontier Foundation. Bob, always great to hear from you. Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We talk about technology a lot on the show, and there's an interesting article relating to technology by Dr. Helen Driscoll, who's a senior lecturer and researcher at the University of Sunderland Psychology Department in the UK. She wrote an article in Huffington Post UK about the possibility of sex with robots in the future. And we've sort of talked about this a little bit in the past, and this is an interesting new take on it. She says that as robotic sexual technology continues to advance, it's likely that the social norms around sex and relationships will change. And she says robophilia may seem like an alien concept now, but it could well be normal in the near future as attitudes evolve around technology. Also saying that people might begin to fall in love with virtual reality partners. There's an interesting film with Joaquin Phoenix called Her, where this idea is explored, Joaquin Phoenix falling in love with an operating system. For those who are already in an intimate relationship, there could be a psychological impact here, right? Is there a distinction between a real and virtual relationship? Most people are pretty successfully able to integrate different forms of virtual reality into their lives, talking to people online, video games, video game worlds, movies and television programs, whatever, right? It's all, in a sense, a sort of escapism. And there's a pretty good balance that most people are able to have with what's in real life. But once you involve romance, once you involve sexuality, once you involve sexual organs, maybe that's going to change. So I really am unsure the direction that this is going to go in. Is it cheating is an interesting question. One argument would be, well, people already have emotional connections to people other than their partners. It could be a connection to a sport or hobby, video games, pets, other people as friends and relatives and mentors. Adding another machine to that whole list isn't really cheating in that you're not having a romantic or sexual relationship with another person. The counterpoint, though, is none of those other examples, sports, hobbies, video games, pets, friends, relatives, mentors, coworkers, none of those involve your genitalia. None of them involve sexuality and that type of relationship so that it is different. And having sex with a robot would be a form of cheating. I think it's too early to really predict what the predominant view is going to be. Maybe there isn't going to be a predominant view. Maybe this is an issue on which there will be a sort of great divide in terms of opinion. Send me your thoughts about Dr. Helen Driscoll's article, and also send me your thoughts about this question of whether having sex with a robot would be cheating in the context of a presumably monogamous relationship with another human being. We've been talking a lot in terms of technology about automation recently as well. I told you about the Chinese factory, which by automating most of their processes dropped from 650 employees to only 60 employees. McDonald's is well on the way to the same thing. They have installed some self-serve computerized kiosks in more and more stores, including some in New York City. There was this question of whether the increased minimum wage in New York City would cause companies like McDonald's to want to automate. Obviously, the kiosks are already installed. The minimum wage has not yet increased. So it's abundantly clear that McDonald's has been developing these for several years. It could be, aside from all of the other sidebar conversations regarding minimum wage, etc., could be just a good business decision. According to the Harvard Business Review, customers using tech devices like Taco Bell's app and McDonald's kiosks usually spend more money on average than when they order from a human being. Now, part of that could be the novelty, right? If the normal order at McDonald's is $5 and the average kiosk order is $6, it might be because when somebody is experiencing the novelty of this kiosk, they like the idea of tapping more stuff to customize or grow their order. Once the kiosks become sort of part of the status quo, we'll have to see if the larger order amounts maintain there. But the other advantage, apparently, for McDonald's is that a 2011 study found that these self-service kiosks reduce order times compared to dealing with human beings. So there's a lot of data that is really suggesting this is the wave of the future. We are seeing it in factory settings. We've already talked about how the idea of manufacturing jobs coming back to the US is basically completely bogus, not so much because it's unlikely that a new president will secure a great trade deal to bring those jobs back, but because those jobs have disappeared in great part because of automation. We're going to continue seeing that. Even Mitt Romney was aware of the touch-tone keypad, as he called it, for ordering sandwiches at Wawa during his last campaign. And I think the big picture on this is really very clear. I don't think anyone is surprised that the job of taking orders at a fast food restaurant is not going to be an enduring job for the human race as technology continues to advance. The real question, and I've said this a lot lately because we've been talking about automation and technology, the real question when we talk about a story like this is how will we as humans respond and adjust society for this wave of automation that is coming? Will we allow huge unemployment to happen and say we don't need a ton of people doing anything at all? Or will we say this is an opportunity? This is a huge opportunity for humans as a race, the human race, to reorganize our assumptions that have been true over the last several hundred years with regard to the relationship of people to work. Let's reorganize in a way to really scale up the productivity of our society as a whole. When we have a presidential election every 4 years and you have presidential politics the way we have it, and you have the influence of corporations the way we have it, those are all going to be impediments to making positive changes in this regard. That's what makes me skeptical, but that is really the question that I think we're facing over the next 10 to 20 years along the lines of technological automation. We have a voicemail number, which is 219-2DAVID-P. You can call any time of day. Here's one voicemail we received.
Hey, David, it's Andrew. I just wanted to say, I'm kind of loving what Donald Trump is doing as a liberal and as a progressive because it's going to help. I think it can really help us out so much in 2016. I already think it has, and I'm really crossing my fingers and hoping that he either gets the nomination or runs as a third-party candidate because in either of those scenarios, I think it's going to be a progressive candidate, a more progressive candidate at least, that gets the nomination because there's no way he's winning.
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts on this. I don't know if Donald Trump has already helped Democrats with regard to this campaign. But I think that you're right, that the longer he stays in, the worse it is for Republicans. I would prefer Donald Trump to not get the nomination and to run as a third-party candidate, because he absolutely could have a huge spoiler effect. It's mostly Republicans and right-leaning independents who would support Trump. And if he can pull a few percentage points away from the Republican candidate in states like Ohio or Florida or the close states, that could quite literally turn the election in favor of the Democratic candidate. So no question about it. We will talk to Lewis again from the road on his journey from Texas to Massachusetts on the bonus show. Remember that Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, we will be doing an email blast to everybody on our mailing list with an awesome membership discount special. Sign up for our newsletter at davidpakman.com if you want in on that great special.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.